We're going to move into our next provocative question, which is it more important to get fewer people out of poverty than to provide a minimum amount of service to many, right? So this choice of how deep and what kind of subsidy and assistance do we provide. And I'm going to introduce Sarah Wolfgram, who is the CSBG Program Manager in the Colorado Department of Local Affairs.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. I was actually just whispering an aside to Rand, who will be presenting to you in a moment, that I was impressed by how this agenda's been set up because there's so much for him to build on. You know, starting off with our keynote about transactional versus transformational services and then moving into strategic partnerships and how we really start to bring those things together in an innovative way is exactly what Rand has been leading in Douglas County, Colorado. Douglas County, for those of you that don't have any idea where that is and don't speak county speak, maybe because you don't work for a state office, I go home and tell my husband what counties I'm visiting, and he's like, so where is that actually? Is located smack dab on the I-25 corridor between Denver and Colorado Springs. So they have a lot of access to metropolitan areas, but they also have some suburban areas and some more rural areas in their community. So what Rand is here to talk to you about is some really practical applications of how you look to address this question about whether it's more important to move a lot of people a little bit or to move fewer people in a more impactful or bigger way. And I'm really excited for him to share what they've done in Douglas County through their bundled service program to really show the innovation of partnership and how you can transform a program that started, in his case, from being an emergency services program to being a really impactful, growth-oriented poverty alleviation program in his community. So please welcome Rand Clark.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for your kind remarks. As I log into my computer here, I was excited this morning to be able to wake up to rain and not snow. It was. I talked to my wife last night, and back in Colorado, we got about 4 inches of snow on the ground, and the joys of springtime in our wonderful state. So excuse me here. There we go, and I'm almost ready for you. There we are. I want to just begin by introducing you to a friend of mine. Her name is Sarah, not this Sarah, it's another Sarah. Sarah is somebody that I met back in 2008. At the time, I was not in my current capacity working for the county, but I was serving in a group of service providers and leaders in our community called the Homeless Prevention Coalition. Sarah was a service manager at one of our largest agencies. This agency is a nonprofit. It serves around 15 to 20,000 people a year. They provide basic needs services, food bank, a retail thrift store where people could go and get things either inexpensively or as needed if they were a client, somebody that was low income. They are rent assistance, utility assistance. On a daily basis, a program service manager would see about 15 to 20 families come through, sit down at their desk for 5 or 10 minutes. They'd talk to them about what was going on, and they'd say, all right, these are the things that we have. What do you need? And these are the things we can offer. So we worked together for a number of years, and in 2010, Sarah left. She was getting remarried, and she decided that this was the opportunity in her life to kind of reconnect, to start this new family unit, and so she left her position at the agency and went at home to get remarried and to spend time with her husband and her kids. And I didn't run into Sarah again until 2012 when I started at the county in my current position as a community of care navigator. I was walking into this agency to deliver some paperwork and to talk to the executive director on a couple of projects we were working on. And Sarah was there. I'm like, Sarah, what are you doing here? She was back filling in for a couple of the new program service managers that had taken her place. One was out sick, one was on vacation, the other one had a family emergency, and so they asked her to come back in for a week. And so I said, hey, let's get together, let's reconnect, let's go have lunch. And so I think it was about Thursday or so that week, we sat down over lunch and just kind of got caught up. And I said, so what's been going on? And started talking, and she started saying, Rand, I've been really depressed this week. And I said, why? She said, because on Monday, my first day serving again, I saw 20 families. I've been gone for 3 years. And 14 of those 20 families were families that I had seen 3 years ago, and nothing has changed. They are here asking for the same stuff for the same reasons. It breaks my heart to know that in my community, that people are going to get help, and after 3 years, nothing has changed. And it's causing us in our community to ask the question, then what good are we doing? What are we really doing with the money and the resources we have if after 3 years, nothing is changing in the lives of the families that we serve? So for the last couple years, we've been embarking on this journey of changing the system of care, changing the way we think about helping people in our community. We don't do it right for you, we do it right for us. What we're doing in Douglas County, Colorado may not work in Oregon. It may not work in Nevada or in Idaho or wherever you're from this morning, but I want to share with you some of the principles that we've had to sort of unpack and kind of almost blow up, right? In order to make and find change in our community. I guess one of the first things we really realized was that our services looked a little bit too much like this.
Welcome aboard. It's 2007, and we are more committed to your safety than ever. And that's why we'd like you to pay careful attention to this important safety information. First, please make sure that your seatbelt is securely fastened. Seatbelts can be purchased for $5. To fasten, insert the metal fitting into the buckle and tighten the buckle by pulling the loose end away from you. To release, purchase a release flap for $7. Now I know what you're thinking. We've never paid for seatbelts before. Once we've reached our cruising altitude, your flight attendant may or may not go down the aisle with snacks. If she chooses to, each passenger will be given a single peanut. Lavatories are located at the front and the rear of the airport. Please take a moment to look at your safety pamphlet. The charge for looking at this pamphlet is $3. The charge for looking at this pamphlet and putting it back quickly is $4. Should there be a rapid change in cabin pressure, oxygen masks will automatically drop from the compartment above your seat, free of charge. Place the mask over your nose and mouth. And to start the flow of oxygen, pay your flight attendant $75.63.
Can't breathe.
As always, exact change is appreciated.
Change for 20.
Now I know that some of you are still concerned about getting there safely. Enjoy your flight.
I know it's a funny clip, but I think the people that walk into my agency feel like that all the time, right? Here's your peanut, if we have one. They're in the middle of this crisis. Life is spinning out of control. We're like, have a nice trip. Good luck. Too bad the bathroom's back at the airport. And we had to rethink what we were doing in our community. So I started to sit down with some key stakeholders, some friends who were executive directors, program managers of a handful of our agencies that were willing to be innovative and willing to be creative. And we would sit down over lunch or over wok and chips or over Coke and queso, and we would sort of begin to ask questions and to talk about what was going wrong in our community. Why were so many people showing up at our doors year after year after year, nothing changing? And at the end of the day, we begin to ask the question that I've been asked to address this morning. Is it more important to get fewer people out of poverty than to provide a minimum amount of service to many? We thought about it this way. If we took all of what we did, is it better to help everybody with a little bit or fewer people with a lot? What was a better investment? What was a better way to think about it? And so for the last 2.5, almost 3 years, we've been walking through this sort of process of trying to figure out, can we answer this question positively? We had to start changing some things. We had to start moving from services to solutions. When I started in 2012, we were using our CSBG funds, which in Colorado aren't a whole lot. And we were delivering emergency services. It was rent and utility payments. I looked back at the data about a week ago, and 2006 to 2012, we were essentially helping people with $75. If you took a total population served, the number of people we helped, the total amount of dollars we had, we were helping out with $75. For a typical family, that was $250, maybe $300 worth of assistance. It might have helped, but we really had to ask the question, was it helpful? We were leveraging maybe 20 cents on the dollar. For every dollar that was coming in through CSBG, we were maybe putting together 20 cents on that. And that was basically the person that used to manage, before my time, the person that used to manage those fund sources. It was their time in filling out the reports and putting together the data and writing the checks and taking the assistance applications in. We were convinced that people were including us in their budget, by the way. That every year we would help one time a year with what we did in that service. And I tell you what, if it was the old way, next week it's the beginning of May, and they said, hey, you helped me last year in April, and it's been a year. Can I get some more help again? And they were walking into our agencies with that mindset. But we had to move away from that to providing solutions. I love this quote. Customers don't want to see individual products. They want to see a solution. This is in the context of business and of marketing, but I think it applies to us as well. People want to come to us. They want to see something that's going to help them solve the things that are wrong in their life. Not just something we give them, a service. We have a resident we're working with right now. She's a single mom in her early 50s, and she has an 18-year-old son with some disabilities. The 18-year-old needs some services and needs some things that we have in our community to be able to help him as he transitions out of high school into independent living as an adult. Mom came to one of our agencies because she's homeless and living in her car. In our old way of thinking, we would have just given her a hotel voucher. We don't have any shelters in our community. Or we would have referred her to a shelter up in the metropolitan area, and we said, here's what we can do. The solutions approach is saying, it's not just the housing that's an issue. Even if you're in a hotel, even if you're in a shelter, your son can't get services because what he needed was in-home services. If you don't have a home, you're not getting services. So how do we begin to look at what we're doing, not as just giving her a voucher, but saying this is part of a package of solutions that you need to help you and your son. And so right now, she's living in one of our community supportive housing units. Her son's been able to get services. Now that that's stabilized, she's able to make more improvement in her life because we see not just what we do as a service, but as a solution. Next thing we had to do, we had to move from isolated to integrated. You've already heard some of this conversation in this language this morning. It's not just a matter of bundling services together. I know that's the talk of the day, is how do we bundle? But the reality is I could bundle everything I do, and it's still not going to be enough. We've got to integrate with others as well along the way. We, as government, I work for a government agency, we don't have the capacity to solve all of everybody's problems. I know that's a shock to some people, but we don't. So we've got to integrate it with others. Success is found when we strive to create impact rather than working in isolation, focused only on shoring up our own organizations. It was through the partnerships that we developed and through the things that we started doing together that we were able to really come up with solutions because we began to integrate those with other things that were going on. We have another family right now. It's a young married couple. They have one child. And I just want to read to you the list of the things that we know is going on with this family. They came to one of our faith-based communities asking for some support and some help. And what we found out is that neither are working. The husband is living in his car because his wife and kid are on the lease with her mom and dad, but he can't live there anymore. They need childcare. They don't have childcare. That's why they're living with the kids' grandma and grandpas because they're providing childcare, but it's never at the right time for when mom and dad have to work. They have a vehicle, but it's not like it's barely functional. It was, in fact, for a week and a half or so, it was unoperational. He's been diagnosed with mental health and was not under treatment. He had back issues that were leading to some physical disabilities and his inability to do certain jobs. And is there one agency that's going to be able to cover all of that? There's no way. There's absolutely no way. So we had to do a couple of things. We had to begin to build community consensus. We had to get together with others in our community and say, are you willing to answer this question of what do we need to change in our community to make a big impact, to make a change? We had to take that community consensus on what the change looked like, and we had to use that to begin to build strategic partnerships with others that were invested in that solution of consensus. And then we had to start to build generative networks. This moves beyond just simple collaboration and working together to building networks of people that begin to generate ideas and solutions and do something about it. I mentioned in the reading list a book called Connecting to Change. It's by a plaster tailor in Cleveland, and they define generative networks this way. There's a lot of other work, I think, out of Harvard is the one that's doing a lot of this work right now. It says networks of individuals or organizations that aim to solve a difficult problem in society by working together, but this is where it changes, adapting over time and generating sustained flow of activities and impacts. We call them generative because they're designed to be a platform for generating multiple, ongoing types of change, not just accomplishing single outcomes. They go on to say this, it's a unique and renewable capacity, make it especially useful when taking on complex, unpredictable, large-scale problems which won't yield to a silver bullet solution. If I had a silver bullet solution this morning, trust me, I'd give it to you, I'd write the book, I'd retire. But there isn't. And so we've got to create these generative networks that begin to build on our collective strength and on what we have to offer to begin to generate ideas and solutions. But as we did that, we came to the realization that most of our agencies were siloed. Most of the information we had was siloed. It wasn't shared. We lived, even though we wanted to work together, the way our organizations worked caused us to sort of live in these silos. I remember one time in a meeting, we had about 45 agencies in the room, and we started to share, and we were talking, and one of the folks raised her hand and started talking about a client story and what was going on in this family's life. And the guy next to her had this look on his face. He's like, he realized about halfway through that they were serving the same family. And something more, what he realized is that this agency was telling her to do one thing, and he was telling her to do something else. Because even though we wanted to work together, when our data and our information is siloed and not shared, what does the family do? So we had to talk about how we share outcomes, how we share measurements, how we share customers, and what does that mean to share a customer? And this is the big one, how we share victories. I think sometimes in our agencies, we want to hold on to our victories. We want them to be our victories. We wanted to be responsible for the success of that family's life. Newsflash for you, the only person that's successful when a life changes in that family is the family. It's not us. It's not what we did. It's what they're doing in their lives that make them successful. But we all can share in that victory. I had a faith-based organization, a church, come to me and say, Rand, we heard what you're doing. We want to invest in the lives of 6 families, and we want to make an impact and a change, and we've got this money set aside. And I'm like, yeah! Faith-based money is wonderful money to have, and it's wonderful partnership to have. They can do things that we can't in government. But as I started to talk with them, I said, well, what if you invested that money in the partnership and the shared solutions we have? And instead of just investing in 6 families' life, what if you invest in every single family that we are working with together? Then you're not just celebrating victory in 6 families' lives, you might celebrate victory in 36 families' lives. Your money is now multiplied. It's exponential in its increase. Next thing we had to do was move from application to assessment. How many of you have an application form that people have to fill out when they walk into your agency? It collects data, it collects information. It collects the things that I have to fill out and turn in on my report every quarter, every year, whatever that looks like. It's important stuff, but what I think what's happening is when we become application focused, we become focused on, do you qualify for my services? We get the information about the family, and what we miss is getting to know the people we serve. We know about them, we don't really know them. We have to move from asking what's the matter with our customers to asking what matters to our customer. And so we've designed an assessment tool, something that we use to begin to understand what matters to them. It begins to be our basis. This works for us. It may not work for you. That's okay. It's the fact that we've had to go through this process. We use 10 life domains: adult education, employment, natural supports, financial, healthcare, housing, mental health, mobility, nutrition, child's well-being, to be able to come up with identifying what's going on in that family's life, what matters to them, where they're at. And so over time, we can track change. We use this as a tool to prove that folks are moving in the right direction or not moving in the right direction or stabilizing. The challenge is what we found with this, though, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, is that in assessing them, as agencies and as facilitators, we now know how to fix them, which is no good either. What we have to do then is we have to move from program to process. We have to realize that we can't just have a program that says, you have these things wrong. If you do this, everything will be right. Instead, we have to develop a process that helps move people towards the change they want to see in their life. We assume that people in crisis have a plan. Right? How many of you, I've heard this in our agencies before. Somebody will walk in, hey, we'll give you this $250. Do you have a plan? What are you going to do next? And they're like, I don't even know what I'm going to put on the put on the table for dinner tonight. I don't know what's going to change in my life, what's going to happen in my life. And so we've developed a process. We've gotten away from programming, although we have programs, and we moved to what's more important is this process of assessing needs, of engaging a family, getting to know them, getting to know their culture of origin, getting to know how they've grown up, what's important to them, what their values are, what their strengths are, what their background is. And we turn that then into planning with them, helping them develop a plan that is based on what their vision, what they want their family to look like, what matters to them, what they want to change, not what I think they should change, but what they want to change. And the most important question we've asked is, why do you want to make that change? What are the core, basic values and motivators behind you wanting to make that change in your life? Then all the programs come in that implementation phase, where we begin to work with those families to help them make that change a reality in their life. I can tell you right now, most of the families that are not successful, they aren't successful because they didn't complete a program. They aren't successful because they flamed out or they didn't want to work. They're usually not successful because our process is broken down. It usually happens because early on we didn't get to know the family well enough. We assumed we knew who they were. We thought we had the right idea about what their values, what the changes were, and we got it wrong. Their values didn't change. We just didn't understand them well enough. So our model is customer-centered, it's team-based, it's naturally supported, it's collaborative, it's community-based, it's culturally competent, it's individualized, it's strength-based, it's persistent, we don't give up on them, and it's outcome-based. What changes in their life? The facilitator that helped us develop this process says this: if we can meet the needs of families, if we can meet the needs that families choose for themselves, build up their confidence and skills to meet their own needs in the future, and help them build up their social networks in a way that helps them reach out when they need something, then we will see positive results. It's not about us delivering a service. It's about us providing a process that empowers them to make the change that is necessary in their life. Finally, this one, we've talked about it this morning, moving from transactional to transformational. I had a mom I was working with, 3 teenage boys. The oldest was just out of the house. The middle one was in and out of jail, had some developmental disabilities. The third one was currently in out-of-home placement for smoking marijuana. I was working with mom, and one day I walked into mom, and we met at McDonald's every once in a while. And as I talked to Mom, she came out all excited, Rand, I've decided to give up smoking. I'm like, that's great. Why? Like all along assuming it would save her money, she'd be healthier. She said, I had to give up smoking because my son is coming home next week. And if I'm going to expect him to stop smoking marijuana, I have to stop smoking cigarettes. I never mentioned stopping smoking to her. I never asked her to stop smoking. But she began to make that transformational change in her life, that my actions and my attitudes and the things I'm doing are affecting my son. And if I don't change, I can't expect him to change. That's transformational thinking. And that's what we try to do as best as we can. What that does is it transforms communities. One of the greatest things that's happening now is as we've developed this process in the system is that we're starting to see our agency partners, there's 13 of us now, starting to use some of these same processes with everybody that they help, not just the small that we're working on our pilot program over the last couple of years. They're now implementing this with everybody that walks in their door. We change families, we change lives along the way. At the end of the day, what's changed since I had lunch with Sarah a few years ago? The reality is that we're still doing rent assistance and we're still doing utility payments. At the end of the day, what we do for our clients and our customers and our residents has hardly changed at all. We had a little bit of employment support because we can do that through CSBG, so we pay for some glasses and some uniforms and a few things like that. But the bulk of our money is spent on exactly the same thing. The difference is that 7 or 8 years ago when we were spending $75 a person for once a year, we're now investing about $1,800 in a family's life. Instead of leveraging 20 cents on the dollar, we're now leveraging, honestly, it's almost $13 to the dollar. About $1.4 million worth of service delivery programs through the in-kind work of our partners. 13 to 1. This is what's changed, how we operate. The ethos of how our community works towards these solutions. We used to be siloed. We used to be transactional. We used to be isolated. There used to be a service that a resident had to apply for. And now it's 13 partners spanning 3 government agencies, a number of different faith-based organizations, our largest key stakeholders of the nonprofits in our community. Basically, at this point in life, I'm going to be honest with you, if you are a service provider in our community, doesn't matter what sector you're from and you're trying to help people, they're knocking on our doors asking, how can we be a part of this thing? Everybody wants in together because we're solution-focused, we're integrating with others, we're sharing resources, we're based on assessment, and we're very process-driven. And why do we do it? To provide transformational opportunities for everyone in our community. Opportunities that look like family stability, economic security, self-sufficiency. We've been running this program now for about 2.5 years. The first year was kind of in test pilot mode, pre-production, and for the last 1.5 years, we've been operating this at a small scale as best we can, given the funds and the resources we have. But to date now, in the last 2.5 years, 65% of the people that are coming through our apartment, through our program, through our process, are leaving self-sufficient. 65% success rate. 78% are obtaining employment and maintaining that employment. 78% are obtaining and maintaining housing that they can afford. Our question now is, can we do it to scale? And that's the next step of our journey as we take this from being 35 families a year to hopefully 90 families a year in the next few months. This is what we're providing. Not a handout, but a way out. We want to provide a process and an opportunity for the residents that we serve in Douglas County, Colorado, a way out. A way out of where they are. I'll leave you with this one last story. I remember a young couple that we worked with early on. They were both recently out of prison. They both had felony convictions, which if you work in housing, if you work in social services, you know that's almost like, it's like a scarlet letter F. And they came to one of our agencies asking for hotel help. They were homeless, living out of their car. They had a 5-year-old and twin 2-year-olds. So we put him in a hotel, and we got him connected to this program, and we started working with him. I remember early on we were assessing the dad, talking about what his dreams were, and he's like, I ain't got time for dreaming. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure my little girls are taken care of. He had a part-time job, and the mom wasn't working. And long story short, over the course of about the next 6 to 9 months, they both were employed. They increased their income from about $18,000 a year to up to about $45,000 a year. The mom, diligently, every single night, she would call Craigslist trying to find a place that would rent to her. And finally, they found a place that would rent to them. And about 4 months into the program, we moved them out of homelessness, and they moved into an apartment that somebody was willing to take a chance on them. And a couple months later, we were following up and kind of wrapping them up. And I remember them sitting in my office, and he started crying. And he goes, man, I just remember we got out of prison sitting in a hotel room in the bad part of town that was no more than 10 by 10 with mats on the floor. They weren't even really beds. And us wondering if this was all that was ever going to be for me and my kids. And we moved into our apartment. We didn't have anything, but we sat there on the carpet in an empty room of an empty 2-bedroom apartment, sobbing and bawling, realizing that even though we didn't have everything, we now had an opportunity to move beyond that. It was their way out. So is it more important to get fewer people out of poverty than provide a minimum amount of service to many? Our answer has been yes. And we continue down this journey of trying to unpack these principles to continue to improve what we're doing to help people. And what we are hopeful of is that we don't have to ask this question anymore, because we have created a process and an opportunity for everybody. And it's not a matter of more or fewer, it's a matter of everybody gets that same opportunity. But we had to start somewhere. And so for the last 2 years, it's been helping fewer people better. Our hope, maybe 5, 6 years from now, is that we can answer this question no, because we can get them all out of poverty and not just few out of poverty. Put my contact information up. I know we're going to go into some time of working through this at your tables and to sort of discovering some of this. I'm also going to be here for the next couple of days, happy to connect with any of you and share slides, share resources, share ideas as I can. This isn't about what we are doing. This is about, in Douglas County, it's about what we're all doing across our country, I believe, and trying to help provide those opportunities for the residents we serve. So thank you very much. Where are they currently? So I think there's some folks in here, think about this from like a hospital type of environment, right? There's some folks that are in an ER and they're heading up to the OR, right? It's like pushing up on the cart. You guys see the TV shows. There are guys like on the gurney, like shocking them as they're going to the operating room. Like those people are not ready for their way out yet. They're just ready to survive, right? So we're trying to, through our assessment, try to say, hey, not yet. In fact, we just had one, told the story last night to some folks here. We had one lady, I remember I did her assessment sitting in a hotel room with her the night after she was abused by her husband, battered and broken and bruised up. And we got her connected to our agency that provides care for domestic violence, and they provided those ER services, but she wasn't ready to move a way out. She was just trying to figure out, am I going to live? 7 months later, fast forward it, that domestic violence agency brings her back to the table and says, hey, we've stabilized, we've done what we need to do, now she's ready for the way out. So we're not taking care of those. Some folks, right? You know this, right? They're in crisis mode. They're critical. We're that way out. We're that next step. We're the inpatient to outpatient realm of hospital care, right? Then we're also trying to filter out the other end of that, which is the folks that really are probably okay. They've got a history of stability. Something happened, but really 1 or 2 interventions, and they're probably going to be all right. So we're looking at things of how many community resources are they engaging? How long has this been going on? What's their motivation to change? We ask in our assessment process, like, what do you want to change in your life? Don't tell me what's wrong. What do you want to, and we ask that question, what do you want to change in your life? And we try to hear from them. And so that's part of it. We have to find our sweet spot, again, that investment spot, which is not the crisis, not the 1 or 2 interventions, but those folks in the middle that need the inpatient, outpatient care. That's kind of our that's kind of our place in the care spectrum, as it were. We have other agencies that do the emergency room. We have other agencies that do the one-offs.
One more comment or question, maybe on this side of the room. I'm trying to give you guys some love over here.
And again, I'm around, happy to sit down and talk with you over the course of the next couple of days. So,
I'm Dina Eldridge. I'm from a community action agency in Oregon. And so, you know, we always have the pressure of the funders who are putting these eligibility requirements on us and their ideas of who we should be serving first. So, for example, HUD wants us to be serving the most desperate, the chronically homeless, the people who are in the ER, basically, on the street. Theory being that their lives are probably the most at risk from being on the street, so we should help them first, which does make sense, but they're also very hard to serve and stabilize. So how does your model reconcile with funders' priorities like that?
So I would tell you two things. One is funders love it because we have a process. Like most funders at the end of the day, they just want to see that you've thought through what you're going to do with their money. And you have to be honest with them. You got to be honest about what you consider success, how you measure success, what you consider failure, how you handle failure. They want to know you have a process. This is a great place to close because I want to say this. Don't model what I'm doing. Model the process we went through to get to what I'm doing. Because this process of moving from isolated to integrated and siloed to shared and all these good sort of things, those things are transferable whether you're working in early childhood education, you're working with homelessness, you're working with food insecurity. It doesn't matter. So don't model what I did. Model the process we went through of wrestling these questions and what makes sense for our community. What makes sense for Douglas County may not make sense for you. But I think the process thinking of what we had to wrestle with is sound in terms of apply those things and ask those questions. How do we serve a resident who's homeless, that's chronically homeless, that are the most vulnerable? How can we get away from isolated systems? How can we get away from siloed systems? How can we move from services to solutions? How can we share? Ask those kinds of questions. And your answer in terms of how it actually ends up looking and working in your community will be different than mine, and that's what's great about this, is that you shouldn't do what I do. In fact, I would tell if you're going to do what I do, then the only way that works is if you move and come do it with me in Douglas County, Colorado.
There's your invitation.
So, all right. So thank you again for your time. I appreciate it this morning.
Wonderful.